is the second part to our Shiurim on Mashiach. I think this is going to go through many, many parts. There's really a lot to talk about. I have a lot to share with you tonight on many different topics that hopefully will weave them all into each other. Discussing the Parsha, discussing what's coming up this month, the 3 weeks, and ultimately Tisha B'Av, the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, and how that's all an integral part of the process of Mashiach. And then we'll get into some of the sources themselves. But where to start? So we'll start with the source just to try to understand the depth of what Yemot HaMashiach is. So if everyone go to page 2 on their source sheets, on the top it'll say page 2. So you look at page 2 in the middle source. It's a Gemara in Shabbos. We're going to do 2 Gemaras, and then from there we're going to spring into many different topics. But the Gemaras will lay a little bit of the groundwork. And the Gemara says in the middle, the underline in the middle, V'higia shanim asher tomer ein bahem chayfetz. There are days coming in which mankind will say there is no more desire. That's what a pasuk says. The pasuk says there's going to be days that are coming where there's no more desire. Eilu yemei Mashiach. That'll be the days of Mashiach. She'ein behem lo zchus v'lo chova. These are days that there will no longer be merit or punishment. Days that there will no longer be merit or punishment. Now again, the whole purpose of creating this world is to do mitzvahs and to earn merit, and to avoid averos, which will incur punishment. So evidently, Yemot HaMashiach is a time when the entire purpose of creation will no longer exist. It'll be a time she'ein behem chayfetz. There'll be no more physical desire. The world will not have, it seems like it won't have free will because there won't be any desire to chase after our animalistic urges. It'll be a time when there's no zchus and no chova. It sounds like there's no reward, no punishment. You just exist. So we have to ask a question, what's the point of a universe where you just exist? You're here to do work. So why would we need a time like that? That's question number 1. And here's question number 2. If you look at the next Gemara, one beneath it, the Gemara in Shabbos as well. So it says there's 2 underlined pieces I want to see. Atida isha sheteled b'chol yom. It's pretty amazing. In the future, women will give birth every single day. It's a lot of babies. Women will be popping out babies every single day. No more 9-month wait. Every day a new baby. That's what the Gemara says. So we have to understand what it means.
It'll be a long day.
A long day. Yeah. Okay. If you look at the next underline beneath that, Atidim ilano shemotziim peres b'chol yom. Fruits will no longer take time to produce fruit and for it to ripen. Trees will produce fruit every single day. The line beneath that, Atida Eretz Yisrael shetotzi gluskos ukli melas. In the future, the trees in Eretz Yisrael will produce loaves of bread. You don't have to take wheat and grind it up anymore, no more flour, no more water. Loaves of bread will grow on trees. And kli melas, and your clothing will grow on trees. Material, spools of material will grow on trees. And you'll be able to just make your clothes out of that. Okay, so we have to understand what all of this means, that there won't be any more 9 months of pregnancy. Fruit will not need to ripen. It'll be produced immediately. No more work for bread. Right? All these things, what does all of this actually mean? And it could be that there are going to be sources that learn it literally, that this is what's going to happen. And there's also the figurative, metaphorical message that's going to be contained within this. So we have to understand that...
The reversal of Adam and Chava sins.
So we'll see. This is what it was like before Adam and Chava sinned. So we'll see what that means. So right now we live in a reality that's the epitome of exile. We're in Galus. This is why we're Rosh Chodesh, right? Rosh Chodesh Tammuz is tonight. So we're celebrating Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. Tammuz is a month that the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash began, and it culminated next month in Av, on the 9th of Tisha B'Av. So these are weeks that there's a very, very deep avoda. In fact, my favorite holiday of the entire year, believe it or not, and it's weird to say it, is Tisha B'Av. Most people wouldn't feel that way, but Tisha B'Av is a very, very deep holiday. It's a very, very deep holiday, and you're wondering why I call it a holiday. It's a day of mourning. Right? You're supposed to, the avoda of the day, every day has its own unique mitzvah. The mitzvah of Tisha B'Av is to mourn, it's to cry. Tears are the mitzvah of the day. If a person can bring himself to tears over the fact that he doesn't have the Beis HaMikdash, so then he succeeded in the avoda, in the work of the day. If he can't, so then he has a lot more work to do. Maybe he should cry that he can't cry yet. So, right? because he doesn't feel the exile that we're in. So what's happening during these 3 weeks? Why do I find it the most meaningful day? So there's a pasuk in Tehillim that says, Ashrei ha'ish asher tiyasrenu ka. Praiseworthy or joyous is the person who the name Ka, Yud and Hey, that's the name of Hashem, that the name Yud and Hey, that name of Hashem, praiseworthy and happy is the person who suffers at the hands of that name of Hashem. Yud and Hey, Yud and Hey. Okay. So we have to understand, what is this name of Hashem, Yud and Hey? So generally, there's a tetragrammaton, the 4-letter name of Hashem is Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. That's the name of Hashem. Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. So the pasuk says, why do we call these 3 weeks Bein HaMitzarim? Bein HaMitzarim means between the straits. Between the straits. These 3 weeks when the Beis HaMikdash was being destroyed is called a time that we're between the straits. So the pasuk says, Kol rodfeha hisiguha bein HaMitzarim, that all of her pursuers caught up to her. They captured her between the straits. That's what the pasuk says. So the Chassidish, the deeper Sfarim learn, Kol rodfeha. If you take the word rodfeh, it's rodef, reish vav dalet pei, and then at the end it's rodfeha is a yud and a hey, which is the name of Hashem. So they split the 2 in half, and they say kol rodef ka. Anyone who is seeking Hashem, anyone who is chasing after Hashem, the name yud and hey, hisigua will actually succeed in reaching that level of Hashem bein hamitzarim within these 3 weeks. Within these 3 weeks. Okay, so this is what these 3 weeks are about. Before Adam Rishon sinned, so the Gemara actually tells us that everything we mentioned here, that a baby will be born every single day, and that bread will grow on trees, that was the existence before Adam Rishon sinned. That was existence. Adam Rishon was put in a garden, and he was given one commandment, a negative commandment. Just sit. Just don't eat from that tree. Sit, everything's perfect. The world is perfect, just don't mess it up. That was Adam Rishon's mitzvah. Now, once Adam Rishon ate from that tree, so it introduced a new element into the world called the zuhama of the nachash. It's called tumah, impurity. It introduced impurity and evil into the world, but not only is there evil in the world, that it exists in the world, but evil is actually mixed with good, so that you can no longer differentiate between evil and good. Before, when fruit would grow on trees, there was no pits, there was no peel, everything was edible. Right? There was only delicious fruit. Now there's mixed within the fruit, there's something called psolis. There's the impurity, there's the waste matter is mixed within. Meaning not just in the human psyche do you now have evil in the world, but it's reflected in the physical reality, that the physical world also now has shells. It's called klipos, shells and pits and impurities in the world that you need to refine the physical world. So now you can't just have bread growing on trees. You need to grow wheat. And when you take wheat, you have to do an avodah called borer. You have to sort, you have to take out all of the chaff and all of the impurities, and then you have to be left with the seed that's within. That's the message of what took place when now you have to make bread. It doesn't just mean physically now you have to make bread. It means that now the work is not just sit and let the world be perfect. Now you have to go down into the world and you have to purify it yourself. That's the new work. And now that work is not going to be easy. The punishment of Adam and Chava was that now you're going to experience this new thing in the world called pain. Pain. Pain did not exist in the world. There was no such thing as pain. But now, Hashem tells Chava, B'tzar teled, you're going to give birth with pain. That was her punishment. You're going to have a painful birth. Before that, there was no pain. Epidurals were free. They were built in. Right? No pain. Adam Rishon's told, B'tzeas apecha tochalechem. Now, you're not just going to have bread grow on trees. You're going to have to work by the sweat of your brow. You're going to have to plow. You're going to have to plant. You're going to have to reap. You're going to have to grind. You're going to have to knead. You're going to have to bake. There's going to be a whole process. In Hilchos Shabbos, there's 11 malachos, 11 different steps just to make bread. So you're going to have a lot of work to do. Because what did you do? You introduced impurity into the world. And now the only way to rescue the sparks of holiness that have fallen into that impurity, into those shells, is through pain. So pain was introduced into the world. So now there's a process called pain. But what we have to understand is that hidden within the pain is the Kedusha, is the holiness, and is God. God now, instead of being able to just give you the good, which was before Adam Rishon sinned, now he needs a process, and in that process, through the pain, if you're focused, you can discover God. He's hidden within the pain. He's there in the pain. What name of Hashem is hidden within the pain? So that's the name Yud Ke, the Yud and the Hey. The Vav and the Hey, Chazal tell us, are what Hashem used to create this world. The Yud and the Hey, the first 2 letters of Hashem's name, is what Hashem used to create Olam Haba. So Olam Haba, right, the world to come, which is like Yemona Mashiach, which is the utopian existence, is now hidden within the pain. It's hidden within the impurity, within the tumah, within the zuama, within the klipa, within these shells. And now we have to go into that and we have to rescue it from within. So whenever you see a process that has pain, so you can rest assured that Hashem is there. Hashem is in that process of pain. Birth, which brings life into the world, which is the creation of life, requires now a very painful process to bring that life into the world. So there's giving birth to another person when you have a baby, but the reason you're in this world is to give birth to yourself. When you do a mitzvah, when you work on yourself, when you actually succeed in overcoming a trial and a tribulation, so you're actually actualizing your potential. You're giving birth to yourself. We think that we just exist in this world, right? But this world is temporary, as we spoke about in the previous shur. The next world is the eternal world. If you want to exist in that world, so it depends how much did you give birth to yourself in this world. And the way to give birth to yourself in this world is to go through pain. Has anyone here sat shiva before? So nobody wants to sit shiva, but most people that have sit shiva will tell you it's one of the richest, most meaningful weeks of their life. It's not fun. It's sad. But that whole week, they're connecting to their family, to their friends. They're not shaving, they're not listening to music, they're not looking in mirrors, they're not leaving their house. They're focusing on what life is all about. No one comes into a shiva house and talks politics and sports. If they do, they should probably leave. Right? They talk about the good deeds the person did, the Torah that he learned, how much he helped people. Right? Everything you're focusing on in that house, not about how much money he made. Most people don't come into the shiva house and say, wow, he made so much money, he drove such a nice car. Right? No one talks about that in the shiva house. Shiva house is a zone where you focus on the name of Hashem that's within the pain. You focus on the eternal reality of life itself. That's all that happens in a shiva house. So a person who goes into a shiva house, some people say it feels like they've been in that house for a month. It feels like it goes by forever. Because there's two things, and this we've mentioned before, that bring a person into the present moment. Very often, when a person is older in life, time flies. Time flies by very, very quickly. When you're a kid, a day feels like a year, and a week feels like a lifetime. When you're a kid, time goes by very, very slowly. So why did that shift? So when you're an adult, you spend the majority of your time living in the future and the past. You spend very little time in the present. Most of the time, people are thinking what they have to accomplish, what's next on their list, what's coming up tomorrow, next week, or they're focusing on what happened last week, last year, the regrets they have, or the good times they had. They're always living in the past and the future. Time goes by very quickly when you're not living in the present, because the present just zooms by, it just disappears. Living in the present is when you can experience the richness of life. There's two things that bring a person into a present: pleasure and pain. When you're experiencing pleasure, so no one is eating a delicious steak and thinking about what he has to do tomorrow, on his to-do list, and he's just totally forgot, oh, I just finished the steak, I didn't even realize. No, when a person is experiencing pleasure, he's there, he's living in that moment. When a person is experiencing pain, so the pain brings him into the present as much as he tries to take his mind off the pain, so it brings him back to the present moment. So Hashem very often will give a person pain to bring him back into reality. He brings him into the present through the pain. Because when a person is constantly living his life in the past and the future, so his life will just fly by. He won't actually experience the richness of the moment, and he won't think about what life is all about. So when you go through a shiva, it's amazing the halachas of a shiva. It's so amazing what Hashem does. He says you're not allowed to leave your house. You have to cover your mirrors. You can't shave. You can't shave change your clothing. You can't shower. You literally have to just sit there for a week. And you have to let everyone come in and visit. You sit on a low chair, and everybody just talks about the meaning of life. And you cry and you mourn, but time goes by very slowly because you have to be there. Everyone in a shiva house, if anyone's been there, they're there. They're in that moment. It's very, very important. It's an amazing process. So many people have come to tshuva through sitting shiva because Hashem brings them back into this world. And because Hashem is hidden within that pain. That's where you can find Hashem. Rabbi Nachman says that when Hashem gave the Torah, so on Har Sinai, there was thunder and lightning and fire and a dark cloud. It looked like the gates of hell. It did not look like, there was flowers on the rest of the mountain. That's what you imagine, this pretty scene. But Har Sinai was terrifying. It was terrifying. And the pasuk says that the Jewish people all moved backwards out of fear. They all moved backwards, except for Moshe Rabbeinu. It says, Moshe Rabbeinu nigash el ha'arafel. He went into the darkness, kisham Hashem. Because that's where Hashem is. So Rabbi Nachman says, Hashem was teaching them the microcosm for life. When Hashem reveals himself to the Jewish people, it's not flowers and angels and beauty. It was scary. There was a dark, dark cloud. But Moshe knew the secret that in the dark cloud, that's where you find Hashem. You find Hashem in the dark cloud. You don't find him on the bottom. Everyone else moved backwards. Moshe went in. He went in. So that's where you find the deepest levels of Hashem in this world. After the Sin of the Rishon are within the process. La'asid lavo, right? When you get to Mashiach, so women will give birth every day. Bread will grow on trees. The process will disappear. You won't have the process anymore. There won't be the process of becoming, of giving birth to yourself. You'll already have reached the destination. So there's no more journey once you get to the Yemot Mashiach. Now, to go a level deeper and to connect it to the Parsha a little bit. So Korach in this week's Parsha makes a very, very strange claim. He says, Kol ha'eda kulam kedoshim. He says, everyone's holy. He goes to Moshe Rabbeinu and says, the whole Jewish people are holy. V'lama tisnasu al kal Hashem. Why, Moshe, do you elevate yourself above the Jewish people? That's what Korach says. So that is a ridiculous claim. Moshe is the leader of the Jewish people. He just took them out of Egypt. He split the Yam Suf. He brought down the Torah. Even when Hashem tried to give the Torah to the Jewish people, they all died 2 times. He revived them, and they said, we need Moshe. Speak to Moshe. He'll relay the messages to us. Everyone recognized they needed Moshe Rabbeinu. The minute that Moshe disappeared, they built the golden calf to try to create another intermediary between Hashem and the Jewish people, because they couldn't handle a direct relationship with fire. Again, it was scary. Har Sinai was filled with fire. Only Moshe went into the fire. So what does it mean Korach's now saying we don't need Moshe anymore? And if Korach was just coming through a little bit of megalomania, that, well, I want to be the leader, so you can't be the leader, so everyone's equal, so then, okay, it would make sense if it was just Korach that bought into this claim. But the Parsha tells us that 250 of the Roshei Sanhedrin, meaning 250 of the greatest leaders in the Jewish people, the greatest minds of the Jewish people, they all bought into Korach. Korach had a lot more people on his team than Moshe Rabbeinu. It was Moshe and Aaron. In the actual Parsha, it seems like it's Moshe and Aaron against the leaders of the Jewish people. Korach wasn't a nobody. Korach was the wealthiest person in the Jewish people. It says that he had 300 donkeys that were loaded with the keys to his storehouses of gold. Okay, the Gemara says he's one of the richest people that ever lived.
So he left Mitzrayim with 300 donkeys?
Yeah, of keys. I don't know where his store. Yeah, I don't know where the storehouses were. I don't know where the storehouses were, but imagine he had a lot more donkeys that were carrying the gold, right? That had some lockboxes on them. But the Gemara says he was extremely wealthy. He was one of the individuals who carried the Aron Kodesh, right? The holiest vessel of the Mishkan was carried by Korach. There was only 4 people in the entire Jewish people who actually were allowed to carry that, and Chazal tell us they didn't even carry it carried them. When you held on to the poles of the Aron Kodesh, your feet elevated above the ground, and it carried you.
What family was he from?
Korach was from, I forget the name, there's 4 families. There was 4 families. He's from Kahas, but I'm not sure which family. Within that family, he's from a specific family. He's from Kahas. So Korach was a very, very important person. And much of the Jewish people sided with him. In fact, the previous Satmar Rebbe, so he once told his Hasidim that he remembers that he is a Gilgul, he is a reincarnation from someone that lived in the generation, the Dor Hadeh, the generation in the Midbar. He's a reincarnation. So, and he says that he remembers the argument between Moshe and Korach. He remembers the rebellion. And the people asked him, so which side were you on? And he said, I remained neutral, but I remember that it was not easy to pick sides. I had no idea who was right. He said, you didn't know. 250 of the greatest leaders joined Korach, and Moshe standing on one side by himself. So what was the claim that he was peddling? Like, Kol ha'eda kulam kadoshim. Everybody's holy. So we mentioned last week, every 70 years, there's a star that throws off the sailors. So in the previous generation, it sounds very similar. There's something called communism. It's a very similar claim, right? Kol ha'eda kulam kadoshim. Everyone's equal. Why are you going to elevate yourself above other people? We saw how that one turned out. But it seemed like a good idea. It seemed like a good idea. So what was he claiming, though, in spirituality, that everyone's holy? So now we'll get into understanding this name of Hashem. So the Arizal explains that there's 2 spiritual lights that Hashem used to create the world. Okay? 2 lights. One is called the Or HaMakif, the light that surrounds all worlds. It's called the Or that's Soviv Kol Almin, it surrounds all worlds. And then there's what's called the Or Pnimi, the light that fills all worlds, right? The Or that's Pnimi, that fills all worlds. So what are these 2 lights? So The light that surrounds all worlds is the infinite light of Hashem. The infinite light of Hashem. That light of Hashem is so intense that everything is nullified relative to that light of Hashem. Right? That's why it surrounds everything, not spatially, it's not physical. It means that it surrounds everything because it can't enter into anything because it's too intense. It's too intense. It needs to constrict and limit itself. So it surrounds all worlds. Relative to that light of Hashem, everything is equal. When you put the number 1 and 1,000 next to infinity, so there's no difference 1 and 1,000 by infinity, right, on a scale. They're exactly the same. It's infinity. So the infinite light of Hashem is equal, and it affects all worlds equally. When it comes to the Or Pnimi, the inner light of Hashem, that's the light of Hashem that comes into the physical world. That's the light of Hashem that constricts itself, and there's many different levels to that light. There's things that are holy, in which the light is shining much more brightly. There's things that are impure and unholy, in which the light is still there. If God is sustaining it, then the light of Hashem is there. He has to be plugged in or it won't exist. But there, it's concealed in a very intense degree, and there's many different levels in that light. That's the light that we engage with on a day-to-day basis. When you do mitzvahs, when you learn Torah, when you daven, when you say, go towards spirituality and holiness, and stay away from impurity and unholiness, we're saying that godly light is present in some things and concealed in others. Go towards that light. And there's many different levels to that light, to the levels of constriction, that Hashem limits that light and conceals it. The other light is infinite. La'asi lavo, when we get to the future world, so the Gemara says, and the Pasuk says, there'll be a machol la-tzadikim. The tzadikim will dance in a circle around Hashem. This is one of the old reasons for the minhag that Jews always dance in a circle. Because the Pasuk says, in the future world, we'll dance in a circle around Hashem. And everyone will point to Hashem who's in the middle, and they'll say, Ze Elokeinu asher kivinu lach. This is our God that we hoped for. So what's unique about a circle? So a circle, every point on a circle is equidistant from the center. Meaning, what's going to happen in the future, in La'asi Lav and Olam Haba, Hashem is going to reveal the infinite light. When Hashem reveals the infinite light, everyone will experience that light on the same level. There's a part of every Jewish soul, it's the deepest part of the soul, it's called the Yechida. There's 5 levels to every Jewish soul, which is the Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. Yechida is the highest one. And the highest level of every Jewish soul, they're all equal. They're all plugged straight into the Kisei HaKavod, the throne of glory. It means they're plugged into Hashem, and that highest level of the soul. On that level of the soul, everybody's equal. That's a piece of Kedusha, it's a piece of holiness, it's a piece of Hashem that's inside every single Jew. As that soul trickles down through the worlds, so some souls get very concealed, and they come out without a lot of potential, right? And they look like they're very limited. And some souls shine very brightly. In fact, when Moshe was born, it says that his parents saw that he was tov, he was good. So Rashi says, how did they see he was good? So there's 2 explanations in Rashi. Does anyone remember the 2 explanations in Rashi?
Born circumcised.
One is either he was born circumcised, which shows that his physical body was already elevated, it was already kadosh. And what was number 2? The room filled with light. So the room filled with light. You see, from birth, Moshe Rabbeinu in this world had a very special soul. The room filled with light, that doesn't happen with most babies. You see that his soul was glowing through his body. He was born on a very, very high level. Other people didn't have that, right? Because in that light of Hashem, there's many different levels. And our goal is to cling to the levels of holiness and to stay away from the impure. In the future world, everyone will be holy. Kol ha'eda kulam kedoshim. Everyone will be holy. And it'll be the reality. That is the reality. The reality is that everyone is holy. But in this world, until you get there, so the only way to reveal that holiness is to go through that painful process we mentioned until now. In fact, it's even in the physical world. If you want to become strong, so what do? You have to work out. You have to go to a gym. So imagine the first time someone goes to a gym. He has no idea what working out is. He says, I want to become stronger. I feel weak. He says, okay, lift these heavy weights. So he starts doing it. He says, this is terrible. This hurts. This is painful. I don't like it. So they say, no, you'll thank me tomorrow. What happens tomorrow? He can't move his arms at all. Literally, he can't move his arms. Right? It's the most painful thing in the world. And he's feeling more pain. What'd you do to me? You broke my muscles. Now I can't lift anything. I say, no, you don't understand. What do we do? If you want to make your muscles stronger, you have to tear them. If you tear your muscles, so then what's going to happen? They're actually going to rebuild. They're going to rebuild themselves, and they're going to actually rebuild themselves stronger than before. And that's the way that you'll actually grow your muscles. That's the way you'll become strong, right? So it's really, everyone can turn off their cell phones. We've had this, we have at least one a week, so it's good. We're just keeping the tradition alive. So this is how a person actually becomes stronger in the physical world. Just always remember from our previous series, Removing the Mask, is that the physical world is always an expression of a spiritual truth. God doesn't make anything random. So if that's how you grow your muscles, that's how you grow your spiritual muscles as well. And the only way to grow as a human being is to go through trials and tribulations, to go through the pain, not to ignore it, but to savor that moment to the extent that you can savor it, and to try to find God in that moment, because He's there. He's hidden in that moment. He's not a vengeful God that brings pain for no reason. There's always a reason behind the pain. And you can trust that that level of Hashem, Yud and Hey, the higher level of Hashem, that's hidden in the deepest, darkest places. Because again, in this world, Hashem can't reveal Himself in His full glory. So He has to hide Himself. The deeper the pain, the more Hashem can hide a bright spark of holiness in that pain. So He hides Himself there. That's why it says, the Nabi says that in the future, when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, we're no longer going to mourn on Tisha B'Av. It says we're no longer going to mourn on Tisha B'Av. What are we going to do? We're actually going to celebrate it. It's going to be a Yom Tov. Okay, that's very problematic. I understand if you tell me that now that the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, so I don't have to mourn over its destruction anymore because it's back. So I'm not going to cry, but to celebrate the destruction of the previous Beis HaMikdash, you know how many Jews died when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed? Millions of Jews. If you read through the Gemara, what it says happens when the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, it said there was a tree, that there were 300 babies that were hanging from a tree. They tortured babies to death. It said there was a rock, that there were next to the rock there was a box of 300 pairs of tefillin, and there were 10 kabim, 10 bucket loads of brains on this rock from the babies and the children that they killed. The destruction was unlike anything you could ever imagine. The suffering was unbelievable. And we're going to celebrate that with a toast and a l'chaim. It's going to be a day where we celebrate. It's like celebrating the Holocaust. So it doesn't make any sense. So fine, we won't mourn it anymore, but how can you celebrate it? So the amazing thing that's going to happen is when Hashem reveals His infinite light in the future, so it's going to shine so brightly that retroactively we're going to see that the darkest moments in Jewish history contained the deepest levels of Kedusha and of light. They were actually there. This is the principle, that Hashem, to give you the Kedusha and the access to the spirituality in this world, He has to conceal it in the pain. So when you get to the next world, you're going to see retroactively that the most painful moment was the greatest moment. If you walked into a room and you had no idea how the world works, and you saw a woman giving birth, you'd think that she's dying. You'd think that not only she's dying, that it's something terrible you're witnessing. Terrible. You'd run out of the room and think she's being tortured to death. Okay? And you stayed in a little bit longer, you'd see the baby get born, and then she's the happiest mother in the world. And then she's smiling, and it's all over. That's what Mashiach is going to be like. Right? Chevle Mashiach, there's a reason it's called, Chevle means the birth pangs of Mashiach. It means like Mashiach is going to be like a process of giving birth. There's going to be tremendous pain. If you were to walk in at the wrong moment, you'd think that Hashem is torturing the Jewish people, because you walk in and all you see is the Holocaust. Right? So you say, well, it's the Holocaust. If you stay in the room a little bit longer, and you get to the end, so then you'll recognize that the Holocaust was giving birth to the greatest Kedusha that you can ever imagine. We don't understand that, and we never wish these things upon ourselves. And you're supposed to daven that these things shouldn't happen to you. But if Hashem chose a person for this suffering to happen to, so He has to know that something great is coming out of it. There's something great that's hidden there. He might not even discover it in this world. Not everyone who died in the Holocaust understood exactly why they perished. They don't know. But trust me, the moment they got to the next world, they understood. And the moment that we get to Yemot Mashiach, we're going to understand. So Korach, what was Korach trying to do? He was trying to skip to the finish line. Korach was trying to jump straight to the finish line. He was saying, Kol Eda Kulam Kedoshim V'Lamatis Umadua Tisnaso Al Kal Hashem. Why do you elevate yourself above the Jewish people? We're all holy. We're already there. We could just go straight to that level of Kedusha. Let's just jump straight to the finish line. We'll connect to the Or Makif, that light that surrounds all worlds, the infinite light of Hashem. We can get straight to the finish line. That's what Korach was trying to do. He was trying to jump the gun, right? Which is a big mistake. You can't jump the gun. You have to go through the process in this world. You can't go straight to the finish line. But the 250 Roshei Sanhedrin, they said Korach is speaking the deepest truth that there is, that everyone is holy, everyone is equal. And it's true when you get to the next world. When you get to Asid level, when there's a circle around Hashem and everyone's equidistant. But when you're in this world, so you can't jump the gun. So the Arizal says something amazing about Korach. He says that Korach's name is hinted to in the Pasuk in Tehillim that says, Tzadik Katamar Yifrach. So that means that a righteous person, will sprout like a date palm. A righteous person will sprout like a date palm. That's what the Pasuk says. So where's Korach's name in that pasuk? So if you look at the last letter of each word, it spells out Korach. Tzadik, the last letter is a kuf. Katamar is a resh. Yifrach is a ches. Spell it out, Korach. So the last letter of every word is a Korach. So the Be'er Maim Chaim, who's a Hasidic master that lived probably about 200 years ago, so he explained what did the Arizal mean. So he said that how does a plant sprout? So first you have to plant it in the ground. And you plant it in the ground, and then when the time is right, so then it will sprout. And how does it sprout? So how does a seed sprout? So first the seed in the ground, it starts to rot and it decomposes. There's a certain point when it releases certain gases, and then somehow it creates this chemical reaction, and then the new life sprouts out of that seed. First the seed has to rot. And from the moment of disintegration, there's a U-turn, and then life sprouts forth. So that's why we say, whenever we speak about Mashiach, it's always Matzmiach Yeshua, that the salvation should sprout. Because it's always going to go through a process of disintegration. And then the life is going to sprout from that moment of disintegration. So how did Korach die? Well, he didn't really die. How did Korach's life, or life on the surface of the earth, come to an end?
Went under surface.
The earth opened up and Korach went inside. So what does that look like? It looks like you're planting a seed, right? So Korach was planted in the ground. And the Gemara in Sanhedrin says that Korach screams out every day. The Gemara is amazing. It says that there's an Arab that was a traveler of the desert, some Bedouin, and he saw one of the Amoraim, one of the great sages, and he told him, do you want to see where Korach is buried? So he said, for sure. So he took him to this crack in the ground, and he said, go put your ear next to the crack. So this sage put his ear next to the crack, and he heard Korach screaming, Moshe emes v'torasa emes. Moshe is true, and his Torah is true. And then the last line is, and I and my assembly are liars. And I and my assembly are the liars. That's what Korach was screaming. Because in this world, until we get to Mashiach, Moshe is emes v'torasa emes. Moshe is the truth. And Korach is a liar, because we're not there yet. You're not there yet. But, says the Arizal, Tzadik katamar yifrach, that the tzaddik is going to sprout like a date palm. That eventually Korach is going to sprout out of the ground. He's going to come back up, and he's going to become the Kohen of Asid Lava. He's going to become a Kohen. He wanted to become a Kohen, and eventually he's going to sprout and become a Kohen. Because at that time, this truth that he was trying to peddle, which at that time was a lie, because we're not there yet, it'll be true. At that time, it'll be true. And the seed, after it disintegrates, it's ready to come back up. So Korach is going to come back into the world, and that we're going to experience that truth.
I have a question. Maybe we can deal with this later on. I'm sure we will. But I just want to make sure I understand the kind of the big thing here. The Mashiach will come in no longer than 218 years. When the Mashiach comes, there will be infinite good, so much so that we would toast to destruction. What do the sources say about why a generation would merit that? What's the and why would a generation merit that as opposed to all the previous generations, which obviously didn't merit that because the Mashiach is not coming? Because it's wonderful what you're saying, but again, we have 218 years, and maybe the answer is the Tzaddikas will bloom up and it will be different. But what do the sources say? The internal Jewish thinking on why a generation would merit this happening and why all previous generations did not?
Okay, great question. So I think we had actually discussed this before, but there's two ways to answer that question. And one is that the effort of the Jewish people throughout history to bring Mashiach is a cumulative effort. It's cumulative, which means that this generation might not look like the most righteous generation, and it might not look like it should merit Mashiach, but it's going to squeeze out the last few drops into the bucket. And God will always design reality in a way to ensure that we have the opportunity to accomplish that. And again, if the deepest levels of holiness are hidden within the greatest pain, so a generation that goes through the Holocaust can squeeze out a lot of drops. A lot of drops be squeezed out. And if there's a generation that's experiencing the greatest tests in all of history, with technology and the lack of godliness in the world, and the rise of atheism and secularism, and all of these movements that are against God, and almost, now they almost look at the person who believes as a fool, so the whole world is shifted. So then the work that, this is the second answer, that the work that a person does in that generation is worth so much more. Because it's not about the objective level that a person reaches on a scale. We'll never look like anything next to Rabbi Akiva. We're never going to look as good as Abai and Rava, as any of the greater tzaddikim of the previous generations. You're never going to, they will definitely merit on the objective scale Mashiach more than we would. But, as we're mentioning here, what life is about is the process. And the pain and the difficulty is what reveals the holiness. So a mitzvah in our day and age, this was actually said by the Arizal to his Talmud, Rav Chaim Vital, that the Arizal said in his day that he says that he was as great as the Tanaim. So Rav Chaim Vital asked, really, you're as great as the Tanaim? He said, not objectively, I'm not as great as the Tanaim. He says, what do you mean you're as great as the Tanaim? He said, because if they lived in my generation, I would be greater than many of them. Because in my generation, where the tests are so much greater and the access to the revealed levels of Hashem are so much more difficult. And again, his generation was an unbelievable generation in Sfat, living in Eretz Yisrael with tzaddik, surrounded by tzaddikim. But he said that the whole world, the light of God, had been so dimmed already in the year 1500. So the Baal Shem Tov said, the Kamana Rebbe said, can you imagine our generation? Every single Jew that still believes in anything should get kissed on the forehead. And he's the greatest tzaddik alive. Just to believe in this generation, you could say, who knows, maybe if you put that person in a previous generation, they're greater than the sages of the Talmud.
Perhaps another way to answer that also is, we were all at Mount Sinai. Whether we were in a body or our souls were at Mount Sinai. So we've traveled the generations until this generation. We've all been part of that. So it's not just this is generation, it's all cumulative generation.
Yeah, that's a cumulative answer. Yeah, that everybody got there together. And in fact, just another point I forgot to mention, at Har Sinai, the Medrash says that when God gave the Torah at Har Sinai, so we just mentioned that Moshe was the only one who went to the top of the mountain. Everyone else backed up. So the Medrash says that the kid, he brings a mashal. It says there's a king that wants to issue a decree that applies equally to his entire kingdom. And he has a certain advisor that's always next to the king, up there, on the throne, on the stage with the king. So the king, when he issues this decree, he wants it to apply to the advisor as well, equally. He wants the advisor to know that you're in it with the rest of the nation. But he doesn't want to embarrass the advisor and tell him to go down and stand with everybody else when it's time to issue this decree. So instead, he tells the advisor, can you go deliver this message to this person? So the advisor says, King, you already told me yesterday to deliver that message. I already told him. He says, no, just make sure. Can you just go tell him again? So the advisor steps down, and then the king at that moment issues his decree. And the advisor is down with everybody else. So if you look in the Pesukim by Matan Torah, Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu to warn the people that they have to purify themselves for 3 days, they have to wash all their clothing, they have to go to a mikveh. He says, get ready for Har Sinai. Then, a day later, Hashem tells Moshe, can you go down and tell the people to purify themselves and get ready for Har Sinai? And Moshe says, Hashem, I already told them. They already know. We built a boundary around the mountain. Don't worry. He says, no. He says, just go tell them. So the Midrash says, when Moshe stepped down, Hashem started speaking the Aseret HaDibros. That's when Hashem said the first 2 commandments. So why? So according to this, when Hashem revealed himself at Har Sinai, what did he reveal? So he revealed that this the Ramchal speaks about at great length in the Sefer Kinas Hashem Tzvakos. And he says, what did Hashem reveal? He revealed his infinite self. He revealed the Or Ein Sof. He tore open all the heavens. And at Har Sinai, the Ramchal speaks about this, and maybe we should learn it one day together. But the Ramchal says Har Sinai was not an instruction to the Jewish people. People think Hashem just gave over a few commandments. It was a revelation. We call it the revelation of Sinai. It was a revelation. The greatest aspect of it was the revelation. In fact, the rest of the Torah was only given over the next 40 years in the desert. Many of the commandments were not given at Har Sinai. They were given in their seminal form. They were unfolded, they unraveled throughout the 40 years in the desert. Everything was given there, but it was given in a way that wasn't necessarily understood and how to practically apply it. That was given later. But at Har Sinai, what did Hashem do? He revealed his infinite self, whatever that means. We don't know what that means. But when Hashem does that, so everyone's on the same level. So Hashem said, Moshe, you have to step down. He told Moshe, you have to go down from the mountain. You can't be up here with me, because at this moment of revelation, everyone needs to be equal.
Could you explain, please, what does it mean when it says that Moshe Rabbeinu went up? Was that his, if there's no corporality up in the heavens, was it his body that was left and his neshama rose?
I'll explain just what it says in the sources. It says it tries to point out that he went up and it was impressive that he didn't eat and didn't drink for 40 days. So first, it implies that he definitely went up with a body. Otherwise, it's not very impressive. Right? If you're a soul, so why do you tell me he didn't eat and drink for 40 days? So he went up with a body. Now, there is just the way to understand that, just is a side point, but when the Jews ate the man, when they ate the divine food in the desert that was given to them, so they didn't have any waste matter. There was no going to the bathroom after you ate the man. It was like you were being sustained by the life force that's contained in food. When you eat food, almost every food you eat is organic matter. So there's only one mineral really that you eat is salt, and I guess now that they have all these synthetic foods, maybe there's a lot more. But in the olden days, you ate salt. Nobody ate sand and dirt and rocks. You ate salt. And everything else was either plant or animal life. So as we mentioned in the removing the mask shiurim, that when you eat food, so what you do is your body, it absorbs the physical nutrients in the food, and your soul, it sucks out the life force from the food. That's why food always has to be organic. It has life within it. It has to be it was a living matter. So your body sucks out the life force that's inside of it. Now Hashem can actually provide a food that has all of the life force without any of the physicality. That was what the man was. The man is called lechem abirim, which the Midrash says is like the bread of angels. That's what angels eat. Angels eat a spiritual food. What does it mean they eat? It means they're sustained by God, his life force, without having to actually eat the physical nutrients. So Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was on Har Sinai, he was so close to Hashem that he was close to the source of all life, so he didn't need to eat or drink. Right? He was so alive in that place. In fact, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, just a side point, when Moshe wanted to prove that Aaron, after the rebellion of Korach, we're going to see in a few parshios, that when Hashem wanted to prove that Aaron was selected to be the Kohen Gadol by him, by Hashem, and not by Moshe, Korach claimed it was nepotism. Moshe, you appointed your older brother. Right? It's not fair. So Hashem wanted to prove that, to put down the debate once and for all, that Aaron was chosen by God. So he said every leader of every tribe should take a staff, and they should write the name of their tribe on that staff. And they should put it into the Kodesh HaKadoshim overnight. So they all put it in, and in the morning, Aaron's staff they take out, and it sprouted. It actually sprouted, and it had nuts on it, and it had leaves, and it sprouted. It was alive. So the Medrash says that not only did that happen, there was a miracle. Aaron's staff swallowed all the other staffs, and when it came out, it spit them all out. Okay, so it seems like such an unnecessary miracle. It isn't like Paro in Egypt where there's a snake. Okay, to show that the snake's better than the other snakes, he has to swallow all of them, and then it turns back into a staff. Okay, but why did no one was even in the Kodesh HaKadoshim? Why does the Medrash tell us that Aaron's staff needed to swallow the other staffs and then spit them all out? So the reason is that when there's a piece of wood in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the holiest place in the entire world where God's presence is dwelling, so then it's not a miracle if it sprouts. That's what happens when you're in God's presence. You're connected to the source of life. Of course you're going to sprout. Right? So what happened? It needed to swallow up the other sticks to keep them from sprouting. They were contained within this stick so that they weren't exposed to the godly presence that was in that place. So it had to swallow them up, and then when it came out, it spit them all out. So the miracle really was that the other sticks didn't sprout. Right? This is the idea that when you're in the presence of God, so you're plugged into the source of all life. So you don't really need food. So even though Moshe Rabbeinu had a body, again, that body was very pure. Moshe Rabbeinu was the most modest person that ever lived. He almost emptied out all ego, and he purified himself to the greatest extent you can ever imagine. So when he went up into that world, so he can survive on godly food, on the presence of God. He didn't need the physical food for his body at that point. So that's how you understand Moshe in the higher worlds. But back to Korach. So, right, Korach is planted in the ground, and La'asi Lavo, he's actually going to sprout. Tzadika Tamar Yifrach. And in fact, the Be'er Maim Chaim says, sometimes you spell, Hashem hides a name, or he gives a message, as the Roshei Tevot, as the first letter of each word. He'll have a sentence, and you take the first letter of each word, and it'll spell out a secret code. And sometimes it'll be at the last letter of each word. Sofei Tevot or Roshei Tevot. Roshei Tevot means the beginning of each word, and Sofei Tevot means the end of each word. So Korach, we said, Tzadika Tamar Yifrach is at the end of each word, right? It's the last letter of each word. It's hinting to you that this is only going to be at the end of days. Right? At the end of days. So at the end of the pasuk, Korach, it spells out Korach, that he will sprout at the end. So it's really, in those three words, you have the whole, everything I just said is you'll remember it now, because it's all encapsulated in those 3 words. It'll sprout, it's at the end of days, it'll sprout like a seed that's planted, Korach was planted in the ground, and ultimately he's going to sprout from the ground.
Did that event that the sons became, when Korach was raped and all that, that's from that, sprouted from the, even though he was...
So they were holy right then and there. That's not at the end of days. The sons of Korach did tshuva. They already repented before they were put into the ground. So you wouldn't have to wait till the end. But you're right, they did do tshuva, but it was immediate. That happened before they went into the ground. So they didn't actually have to go in. But Korach he's still there right now, right? Until we get to the end of days. So he's gonna remain there. So this is the avoda, the work that a person does in this world, is to live through the pain. When Mashiach comes, so we'll get into this next time. What do we do during Yemot Mashiach? Right? If there's no more pain, again, and there's different steps in the process. There's Yemot Mashiach, which is a utopian existence where we exist in the physical world, and the Jewish people are the chosen people, and there's only one religion to the whole world, and there's a king of the entire world. Okay, that's one phase. And then there's Olam Haba, which is when Hashem reveals that infinite light. That's Olam Haba. That's the world to come. That's when everyone becomes equal. In Yemot Mashiach, of course, there's going to be levels. It's going to be Mashiach. He's going to be the king of the world. He's going to be the king of the world. So of course there's going to be levels in Yemot Mashiach. So there's this intermediary phase called Yemot Mashiach, where the process and the pain doesn't exist to the same extent. We'll see what it means. There'll still be a process of becoming and of growing, but there won't be any more pain. It won't be the same pain. And that will be a transitional period that will lead into the world to come, which is Olam Haba. So we're working towards this transitional period. So everything I really mentioned today about Hashem revealing that infinite light that Korach wanted to reveal, that's Olam Haba. That's the next world. That's at the very, very end. But you have this thing called Yemot Mashiach, which is what we're working towards now, which is all that pain is going to ultimately give birth, let's say, to Yemot Mashiach, which will be this utopian existence. And then from there we're going to elevate into a new phase of existence called Olam Haba. Those who are worthy. In between there's going to be Tchias and Mesim, which we're going to have to discuss. But tonight we just discussed this very deep concept, and it's very important going into the 3 weeks, that in this world right now, before Mashiach, you find Hashem in the pain. You find Hashem in the process. In fact, the Gemara says, and it says in Bereshis, when Hashem created trees, He actually told the tree that the bark and the fruit should both taste sweet. They should both taste the same. And the pasuk says that when the tree actually sprouted from the ground, it rebelled against Hashem, whatever that means. The tree rebelled, and the bark did not have flavor, but the fruit had flavor. So, what did that mean? It meant when Hashem created the world, He wanted the process to be as sweet as the fruit. It used to be that when you worked, like, there's no pain to get to the finish line. The process was a shorter process, obviously, and the process was sweet. The bark, like the tree, the trunk is the process, right? It takes all of the sap and it pumps it into the fruit, and the fruit is the finish line. But now, in this world, it was already in seminal form before Adam Rishon sinned, so it was already there. That the tree already rebelled against Hashem, and the process already became difficult from that moment. So now we live in a world where the process is difficult, the pain is there, the pain is real, but the pain is the opportunity to get to Hashem. So without the pain, there is no gain. Lapum tzara agra, the Gemara says, according to the pain is the reward. So the way to get there is through the pain. So this is the 3 weeks, and 3 weeks are not something someone should, you should just try to avoid and try to, ignore and just get to get past them. It's like a shiva house. The more you meditate on what it means to have lost the Beis Hamikdash, and hopefully we'll speak about this next week, and as we get closer to Tisha B'Av, we'll speak about it a lot more, about what the 3 weeks are all about. What are we missing? Yeah, there's no Beis Hamikdash, so there's no temple, I don't have to go bring sacrifices. It's not what it means. The whole world is different when there's a Beis Hamikdash. The whole world is different. So we have to understand what it means to not have a Beis Hamikdash, and then we'll understand how to hopefully to mourn over the fact that it's gone. Okay, stop there.